So if you're like a lot of woodworkers, you'll get to the point where you need a dado blade and you'll have to decide whether you want to do kind of an entry-level dado set with the two-wing chippers or get something fancier. But you need to know whether that extra money that you spend is going to get you anything that's really helpful for the way you woodwork. So we're going to look at 3 sets today and try to answer some of those questions. The SD208S is kind of the entry-level two-wing chipper. Plus we've got the SD508, which is the Super Dado. It's 4-wing chippers and higher tooth count on that. So plus we're going to look at the dial width Dado, which doesn't even need shims. So a lot of great options, but let's figure out which one might be best for you. So the SD208S is a little different than other entry-level Dado blades just because it has a unique blade configuration. It actually only gives you 3 of these two-wing chippers. Usually you'd get at least 4 chippers in a full Dado set. Only 3 chippers come with this set, and they're pretty typical two-wing chippers, except for they have a much wider carbide tooth on them, and that actually helps for the particular layout of this set, and I'll show you what I mean. It all comes down to these spacers that are included. You get also 3 of these spacers. They kind of look like regular shims, but on further inspection you see that they're much thicker. They're closer to a 1/16 of an inch thick. And you actually use these, you use 2 outer blades, 3 chippers, and 2 of these spacers just to set up a typical 3/4 inch dado. And you also get a more typical shim set for fine-tuning your dado width as well. As far as the main blade tooth geometry, you get 12 teeth, and the hook angle is -5 degrees, and usually the lower the hook angle, the better cut quality will be for fine cuts like cabinet making or hardwood joinery. So cuts pretty well as far as that goes. One other important note is the tooth design. Now Freud has eliminated the anti-kickback pawl right behind the tooth, and so this one is now allowed on saw stops. So if you do have a table saw with a blade break, that may be a big deal for you. So there's the entry side of the dado, and that looks really clean as we would expect. But on the exit side, it actually looks pretty good too. I'd give that about 4 out of 5 stars. This is white oak, so it has a tendency to splinter, but it looks pretty good. A little bit of sanding, that'd look quite nice. Just another look on the exit side of that, just a very minimal chip out there. Overall, it looks pretty good. So maybe in this raking low angle light, you can see that the scoring lines are just barely visible. Really minimal, and I would say on par with much more expensive sets. And then if you jump up to the SD508 set, the Super Dado, you get 24 teeth on the outer blades and those 4-wing chippers. Time and time again, I've really been impressed with this 508. I just can't believe how smooth it'll cut a groove or a dado. It's crisp on the top edge, whether you're working with veneers or hardwood, and it's really smooth on the bottom of the cut. So I think most people, if they didn't need any special features and they had a few extra dollars to spend on a dado set, would be really happy with the 508. So the cut quality on the surface looks really good. Anything that you would see in an assembled furniture joint or cabinet joint looks perfect. There's no exit blowout of any kind, and that's really the true test to me for a high-grade premium dado blade set, and this one passes with flying colors. The bottom of the cut is nice and smooth as you would expect. That would make a nice looking joint. Other differences on the 508 are the hook angle is actually even lower. It's a -12 degree hook angle, and that translates into very minimal exit chip out when you're doing hardwood joinery, and to me that's a big improvement. The 4-wing chippers are kind of basic looking and painted black. It's nice that it increases cut quality with the extra teeth. Unfortunately, they do have anti-kickback pawls on both the chipper and the main blade, so technically it's not approved for saw stop use. And this is what I consider a full professional set because you get 4 standard chippers as well as 2 odd size chippers, 3/32 thick, and a 1/16 inch chipper. That's super handy, so quite often you won't have to use shims to set up the right size dado. Now just remember that when you're looking at the thickness, it's the plate thickness that matters. That's what will be 3/32 on these odd size chippers, not the width of the teeth. The case leaves a lot of room for improvement, but I guess if it was $40 more expensive, some people wouldn't buy it. So As it sits, it's a very good value and it's an excellent cutting set. And you know, if you happen to keep this in a drawer at your table saw cabinet, maybe the case won't even matter to you. And finally, we'll check out the SD608, that dial-a-width dado. So claim to fame there is you won't have to use any shims because you can just rotate this hub on the side of the blade, and every click on that will change the width of the stack by 0.004 of an inch. So super handy in theory, and it does work. The issue I came up with was that you have to have an arbor on your table saw that's long enough to accept this, simply because the hub mechanism just makes the blade a little bit wider. I personally ran into some compatibility issues on my Laguna Fusion F2 saw, as well as my SawStop 3-horse PCS. The arbor just wasn't quite long enough to accommodate the extra width of the dado stack, so I would say that you should have an arbor length of at least 1.5 inches to consider using this saw. So if you have an older Powermatic or just a big sturdy table saw that has that arbor length, this might be a good choice for you. It doesn't quite have the cut quality as the SD508 in testing. That may vary from blade to blade, but I was incredibly impressed with this one's brother, the 508, and the cut quality on this one was above average, but it didn't quite reach the level of the 508. And mostly that had to do with the flatness of the bottom of the cut, which really surprised me because this uses the exact same 4-wing chippers as the 508. I really like these chippers. The number that you get is slightly different in this kit. You'll get 5 of these chippers. You don't get the 16th chipper, but you do get a 3/32 undersized chipper. Makes sense, I guess, because a lot of the times you won't worry about shims or undersized chippers. You'll just twist that dial and that'll fine-tune the width of the dado automatically. And the outer blades are actually a 2-piece assembly, so if you flip that over, you might be able to see there's an insert and screws that retain that. This outer blade doesn't get too much wider because of that hub, but the other blade certainly is quite a bit wider just to accommodate that special feature. So if you're shopping for a new dado blade, just drop down to the description box. You'll find direct links to these 3 dado blades and know that you're going to be getting the best price. But my basic impression on these, the SD208 S is a really good starter dado blade. It's different than most because, like I said, you only get the 3 2-wing chippers. Usually it comes with at least 4 chippers, but with those unique spacers and wide carbide teeth, it does seem like it's a pretty good system. As far as the SD508, the Super Dado, that one is just excellent for almost anyone, and it gives some of the best cut quality that I've seen from any dado blade. The only real negative there is it's not technically allowed on a SawStop, but you can make your decisions on that, or maybe you have a typical table saw that doesn't have the safety brake. And the final option is the SD608, that dial-a-width dado, no shims. It's really good in theory, but I would really only recommend the 608 if you have a table saw with a particularly long arbor. I had compatibility issues with mine, so I would say if your arbor length is 1.5 inches or better, you should be fine, but any shorter than that, and you should probably be better off with one of these other 2 options.